Welcome to Presentation, Ponder, Practice. Hosea draws the parallel between his marriage to Gomer and God's marriage to Israel in Hosea chapter 2. Punishment and humiliation would be dealt out to Israel because the people claimed blessings from God actually came from Baal and because of her unfaithfulness. Jezreel would become a name of salvation. Hosea chapter 1 and verse 11. Lo Ruhamah and Lo Ami would also be reversed. Say to your brothers, you are my people, and to your sisters, you have received mercy. A change in name signifies a change in status. These things would come true in the future for Israel. Now a warning of judgment. The children were told to contend with their mother, set themselves apart from her, lest they suffer what she would suffer. The damaged relationship voided the children belonging to God. If they separated from their mother and joined themselves to God, they could be His people. To remain following after their mother, though, would continue the moral decline which was already taking place. The mother was instructed then to put away her promiscuity and adultery, her offensive sexual behavior and unfaithful behavior. She must abandon her former ways. If she would not, she would be humiliated without help, abandoned to her own fate, much like Ezekiel chapter 16, verses 4 and 5. At some point after the birth of Gomer's children, she became unfaithful to Hosea and left. The productive land would go back to not producing again. The mother, the woman, would die of thirst in the unproductive land. These signs showed Israel would lose everything. The land itself would dry up and not produce, and the people would go away into captivity. God and Hosea said, also, I will have no compassion on her children, because they are children of harlotry. The children do not have a right to be called God's children or to call God their father. They did not know what it meant to be a keeper of the covenant. Their mother, Gomer, or the political and religious leaders had taught them greed, immorality, and idolatry. The people did not look or behave like children of God or children of God's prophet. The children, the people of Israel, were conceived in the status of disgrace. Hosea was sowing the doubt in the minds of the people, which the people of Israel had already put on him because of his children. The question that he raised sought a personal and a national response. Is Yahweh really our God, or are we children of another, children of Baal? The mother conceived children with her lovers. Then she went after the lovers, claiming that they gave her agricultural prosperity. The lovers were to Israel the foreign nations which they allied with because of the benefits that they supposedly offered. God would block Israel off from the lovers she had sought. Her sin will receive punishment, and she will return or be redeemed. Then Israel would refuse to acknowledge God as the source of fertility and agricultural success. Israel, therefore, will be punished with moral corruption and starvation. When the reader expects then the redemption text concerning Israel, instead a summary is given, verse 13. Israel's redemption doesn't come until the next large section, verses 14 through 23. Hosea first attempts to wall up Gomer or Israel in preventing her from returning to her immoral ways, but to no avail, verses 6 and 7. He will keep others away from her by hedging up her way with thorns. Next, he will keep her from getting out by building a wall against her so that she cannot find her paths. Her efforts to go after her lovers will not be successful. She will then return to her first husband, for it was better for me then than now, she will conclude, and thus return and be redeemed by Hosea and by God. The blessings God was giving were being used for Baal, verse 8. It was necessary that God put a stop to this ongoing activity. Dramatic and severe punishment is handed down by God as He takes away their necessities, food and clothing, rather than taking away luxuries. He takes what belongs rightly to Him, or rightfully to Him. Captivity, extreme poverty, and humiliation are signaled by the second imagery of stripping the woman in verse 10. The last line of verse 10, and no one will rescue her out of my hand, emphasizing the coming punishment will not be avoided by Israel or by Gomer, and no help will come from those she has turned to for other things. God would put an end to all of Israel's joy. Essentially, parts of Israel's covenant life, which brought joy, Leviticus 23 verse 40 and Deuteronomy 26 verse 11, would be stopped. The people had fallen away from God by their claims and their actions, and they had fallen away so far that they did not even know that they had fallen away from God. Their outward duties were still being kept, the festivals and celebrations, but God had rejected them, Hosea chapter 2 and verse 11. God would destroy the vines and fig trees. The nation of Israel was saying, "These are my wages which my lovers have given me," verse 12. God would make them a forest and a feeding place for the beasts of the field. This devastation would have a more lasting effect on Israel than the destruction previously of just their grains, which could be regrown much quicker. God would turn His back on Israel, just as she had turned her back on Him. The days of Baals refers to, as explained in the text, the times when the woman turned away from her husband and pursued her lovers. Israel gave praise and honor to Baal for all the agricultural growth and produce they received. The dressing up with earrings and jewelry to follow illicit or secret lovers describes how Israel was going after the false god of Canaan, and describes the women of Israel dressing up to go down to the Baal shrines. What do we learn from Hosea chapter 2? What should we ponder? Evaluate yourself. Evaluate your family. Where there is moral decline, address it. Know this: there are consequences for unfaithfulness which will be paid soon or later. Living to a standard requires accurate claims, honoring, and faithfulness. False claims cannot be allowed to continue without consequences. Intentions must be stopped by addressing outside influence or addressing inside availability, or sometimes both. Our help comes only from the Lord. What comes from the Lord, nor what should be given by us to the Lord, should ever be given to false gods. Success, blessings, nor prosperity prove we are right with God. Famine, shame, and destruction will be brought on Israel because she was guilty of both immorality and idolatry. As you ponder these things, we hope you will find something to put into practice. And may the God of heaven bless you.